Okay guys, my research into the electromagnetic system really took hold when I saw David LaPointe's work on the primer fields. He did this research 10 years ago. He went very quiet on it after doing 2 or 3 videos on it, but he's not the only scientist or researcher to have explored the primer fields. I'll put in a video here and talk it through. So when I'd thought about his primer field work, I was like, wow, that looks to me like the you know, the way a neutron star looks, or a you know, particularly when you look at the middle of it, I started to think, you know, that center between the two bowls was or is the accretion disk, possibly upon which the Earth is formed, or material matter comes into life. So that led me to start to think about the Tesla's 3, 6, and 9, and I came up with this drawing. It's probably not unique, but here's your inverted 3s, which when brought together become your infinity 8. And as I've said in previous videos, I started to conclude that possibly the 9 was the upper force, and the 6 is represented in the lower, and which is why I keep talking about the 666 being a world in which everything is they try and keep us in this sort of lower element of our energy system. There's nothing wrong with 6. 6 is a very essential part of who and what we are. We know that this is where our root chakras and lower energies reside. This is where our stability, and we know that the Earth is solid and stable in its lower section. So I've colored this all in red. So very important part. But if you're imbalanced, and as I suggested, that all the things, the tricks they play on us when we're born by stabbing us in the sciatic nerve, in the foot, pinprick they call it, but it's a shock to the baby's nervous system, which fires right up into the sacral region, affecting the coccyx, and you know, all of those areas, the coccyx being the 6. And I've done that video earlier recently on the coccyx being actually the depiction of the Baphomet. When you look at the bone of the coccyx, it is, or the lower bones of the coccyx, it is a perfect representation of what became the Baphomet. The 9, and again, if you look at this, the skeleton from the left side, you know, this is the skull and this is the spine, and this being the bowl of the pelvis. So this kind of, you know, logically that kind of has a lot of connections to the way we're built. In our world, we know that the sky is blue, the lighter colors are up here, and I started to toy with the idea that all of this in between, this area here in between, would be the sort of green, heart-centered part of the Earth. Now, I continue to develop this later on in this presentation. We know that hot air rises and then cools and sinks, and cool air or cold sinks and then rises again as heat or hot, or becomes heated by the environment. So that kind of fits quite well, and I started to call this the toroidal energy management system. So we've got the ether, the L for electricity, and we've got the ma for magnetism, magnetism. L normally has a masculine connotations, and magnetism, and Ma, I think, would be perhaps described as a feminine energy. Now, all of us have both masculine and feminine 6 and 9. There's no, in that sense, there's no kind of, this is not a gender thing so much as the different kinds of energy, the more fluid, cooler, feminine versus the more sort of rigid, hard, hot-headed masculine type energies, which we all have. And of course, in the modern world, women are being masculinized like never before, and being sort of brought down into the boardroom type mentality. So just some stuff on the electromagnetic theory. What did I do? It's 20th of January this year, 2021. This is when I was going through a period of, you know, deep thinking on some of these things. So electro, blue, L, hell, which is interesting. This I don't agree with. I was kind of working through this. I got to the point where I was like, okay, it's got to be 9. Cold, fluid, fast, water, moon, possibly associated to the moon. We'll get onto that. Magnetism or magnetic is red, and you see, I wasn't sure. Of course, this 9 and 6 can be inverted and be the same thing. What have I got here? I'm not wearing can't find my glasses, so I can't read everything I've written. But matter, marriage, magic, mate. These are all Ma words, aren't they? Mariana Trench, and that's down in the depths of the earth, isn't it? Or what we know as the earth. So that's a little bit on the electromagnetic theory. So yeah, understanding the plasma fields. I've got here something about ego, because we've established that, you know, the word ego actually is derived from goat being the Baphomet, ego being centered in the lower energy system. And let me just quickly say that, you know, ego is not a bad thing, but if there's a fight or flight state for the ego, which we think that if you're damaged when you're young, circumcised, and all these sorts of things, other horrible traumas that are wrought on the young child, then the stability is affected, and so perhaps ego, the need to survive, is tweaked, and the survival instinct overrules some of the other aspects of the balanced heart, the 3, and perhaps even the more spiritual element of us in the sky, the 9. So yeah, as you can see, well, today is the 20-something, near the end of March, so this stuff is a few months old. So I'm not in the same deep headspace that I was then, but I'm really eager to get you guys thinking about this, push this information out. I will hope to, in the months ahead. I've got some periods of instability coming up. I'm not sure exactly where I'll be in the next few weeks, but as soon as I've got my life in a more balanced state, and I'm not in a state of fight or flight, I will seek to develop this research further, and tie in with videos the actual clips and lectures that I studied in quantum physics, that I studied to help me align my thinking. It is fair to say that I am not I'm not a quantum physicist. I wouldn't want to claim that, but I've listened to tens of hours of the best scientists in the world, not the TV scientists like deGrasse Tyson and Cox, but you know, proper hardcore knuckles, you know, bloody knuckle kind of research scientists, and I've used their own words and their own research to edify my findings. I may not be able to repeat it all verbatim now, because as I say, it has been a few months. My head's not quite in the same space as it was back then. But it was always my intention to eventually refine the research and use mainstream science, accepted peer-reviewed science, to recalibrate the way that mainstream science looks at quantum physics. See, the difficulty they have is that they don't, although they say, and I'll put video quotes of them saying, yes, we know the universe is flat, or it appears flat, but they very much think in the old sort of Newtonian type atomic physics, material physics, that everything is they struggle with what is a particle, what is a wave, and when you recalibrate under an electromagnetic flat earth type model, then you can see how they're struggling to sort of put things together can be made a lot simpler in this way. So let me take you through some of my stuff, my early stuff. I started to I got a a protractor, and I started to do my own drawings. This one here I never quite completed, but can you see the word God here? The Freemasons talk about the square and compass, and everything is about squaring the circle, and I think that's right. I think that you can, using just a square and a compass, you can basically depict the nature of our world. This, by the way, and it could be just like happenstance, but you can take this or leave this. But this first circle here also forms the letter E if you wanted to, and this is still G, or this could be G, and this would be O. Again, I've depicted them blue, red. I've done purple with a green line in the middle. I'll get on to why I've done this purple. I developed beyond this drawing, but I just wanted to point this out, that ego, the largest word in ego is down here in the red zone. The largest letter in ego is down here in the red zone, and it ties in with this idea that ego is very much a lower chakra, lower energy part of our system, and which is why I think we tend to operate often out of that. I was looking to start to number things to give people an idea of, or myself really, an idea of how these things build up. How you get from nothing to everything. And I realized that actually the zero, or the nothing, is an absolutely essential part of our system, and that when you explore how a photon of light works, you'll find that actually it starts from basically nothing and then speeds up, and as it speeds up, it takes on, goes through the light spectrum, the X-rays and so on, into the color spectrums and beyond. And as you know, we can only see, eventually I'll put in videos, clips of all of this to help you see it for yourself. But when you see the whole spectrum shown on a graph, you'll realize that what we see in the color spectrum, from the darker reds up into the lighter colors on the rainbow, is really just light returning to full light speed. It's at its slowest, it has a very long wavelength, and at its fastest, the wavelength is getting super tight and actually building up energy again. So if you can imagine as a photon of light, if I had to if I had to smash a photon of light into the bottom of this, it would initially, and we're talking in parsecs or whatever, very small amount of time, it would initially stop or slow right down, and then as it came through the system, as it rolled through the system, it would begin to speed up. And so here it loses its energy, it becomes really slow and perhaps more material, and then as it moves up through into full light speed again, it goes through the color spectrum, and then it eventually returns back to white light. And so what I established was that perhaps this is the 0 point, and this is the point at which it becomes 1, right up here, becomes 1. And then as it smashes through, and I am oversimplifying some of this, but as it smashes through this point, or it hits this wall, which is the outside wall of my, if I was to put a line all the way around this and say this was a single cell, perhaps more complicated than a molecule of, or a particle of helium. As it hits this at the 1, it stops again and becomes 0, and then returns again up the charts all the way up to light speed again, full power, and then continues that. It repeats that cycle of smashing 0, becoming and then becoming a full 1, and then back to 0, 1, 0, 1. So what they were showing us with the opening credits, or where it was in the Matrix movie with all the zeros and ones, I think that is particle physics or quantum physics in a nutshell, really, is that everything is going from 0 to 1, and then back to 0 and 1. And yeah, I'll leave that point there for now. There's so many aspects to this that I could get myself lost for hours and bore the trousers off you, and I really don't want to do that. I'm trying to set the record straight. And here, this shape here, this flower shape, not a fleur-de-lis, but this flower shape here, is a very familiar flower shape, and anyone who's been into a church or looked at the church windows, that kind of thing, you will see this shape all over the place. Right? And this is only built by me as a newbie, really, just putting these circles together, these zeros and ones. And at the bottom, I'm suggesting, here's where just to keep it simple, here's where the photon is entering. It is slowed right down from a 1 to a 0, and then it starts to speed back up again. I've got a more useful picture, I think, here. So this is what I consider possibly to be the dark matter of the universe. And this apple shape here is what I think is a single particle, or a single photon, or a single atom of, let's say, hydrogen. So when the photon, and mainstream science will acknowledge that we are being constantly bombarded by trillions upon trillions, you and I, of what they call dark matter. We are being bombarded all the time, and as that bombardment occurs, so a photon will strike into the underside of the apple, and I really think our fruit is growing in this way as well, by the way. The underside of the apple, it'll come through dark red, and then move through the color spectrum. It's slightly off the green, should be sort of, I suppose, centered. Become the lighter colors. I've put purple here, although apparently we can't see purple, and this is violet. I've got a theory on why we can't see purple, and that's why I've drawn all of this outside of here. I can't remember what my theory was on that, but it'll probably come up later on as I work through this presentation. So here I developed my drawing a little bit further. Let's call this X and Y. You got your X and Y axis, and in quantum physics they accept that there is energy coming in along the X axis, and then there's energy rising up through the Y axis. Okay, and we'll get onto the sort of X-axis stuff perhaps a little bit later, but taking this slightly more developed cellular structure, where I've now put a zero around the whole thing, that would be your nutshell, if you like, your nutsack, and within it I have two cellular structures here. So this would probably be more like a helium, hydrogen, helium. I can never helium, hydrogen, helium. So the second element on the periodic table, and what I've depicted. I can't read this myself, but I try to number all of this 1, 0 through 9, because that's the whole numbering system is 0 through 9, and it's a repeating system. So this would be 0, at this point would be 9, and then 0 again. Oh, you can't see that, sorry. So this would be, at this point would be 9 at the top of the apple, and then into the stem of the apple would be, at that point would be 0 again. There are, I know this aligns with the chakra systems, there are contact points with these overlapping lines that I use to discern what would be for 4, 5, 6, 7 being the center of this, 8 and 9. This isn't perfect, I have to confess, so please bear with me that it's not perfect, and I will, as I say, get my head around it again in the fullness of time and offer it to you as a more concise presentation. But this is me beginning to develop the cellular structure up from the very simplest of structures. Hey, the hydrogen. I do wonder whether actually they say that our universe is 2.5 minus 2.5 Kelvin or something, very, very cold, and I think at that temperature hydrogen is liquid, so it is possible that the universe around us is perhaps in a hydrogen state, and because it has all been, if you like, impregnated by the energy rising. And I use impregnated, but it is part of the sort of Big Bang conundrum, because mainstream science will tell you that they don't know in the moment of or prior to the Big Bang, they don't know exactly how all of this starts. So I'm not going to try and say how it does start, and they're not able to say that. I think that's a God level. That's a God level answer. Oh yeah, that's Alexander's drawings. You don't want to see that necessarily. He was obviously getting in the way of my research at certain times. This ended up being, I'll show you this quickly, this ended up being a possible layup of how the Earth may actually look if it is like a fruit. It looks also like a skull, by the way, with Africa in the center. But you've already seen some of my work on that, I hope. So we'll get into that a little bit more later on. Yeah, so back to this. what I call a nuke, and this is a side view. So it's important that we bear in mind that that this is the side view of your apple. This is cutting the apple down through the stem, through the core, and into the bum of the apple. And it made me think that are our fruits and ourselves actually being nourished by more than just what we're taught in science, which is that the photosynthesis and nutrients coming up from the roots are feeding the plant. I started to wonder whether, and ourselves, I started to wonder whether actually we're being nourished a lot more by the energy rising. So I started to wonder whether this wasn't how perhaps, you know, a hydrogen helium boron. Oh man, I'm sorry guys, but I'm sure you'll forgive me for my lack of excellence in this area, but it is something that I will work on. But I'm saying that this is the first multicellular structure that you begin to get when two of these individual cells become bonded or connected within one nut sac. And so I've drawn everything in the sort of surrounding area as this purple being the color of the background color of the whole universe. But what's interesting here, I mean, this, you know, when quantum physicists look at when they look at I've got some research points here that I want to show you, but I'll get to that. When they look at photons or particles at the very smallest quantum level, they talk about half spins and full spins, and I realize that possibly the half spin is when there is just a single sine wave running up in an atom, in a photon or a particle. There's a single sine wave. So what I did here was I started to wonder whether, if I'm ready for that, this is what they would call an up quark. So you got your energy moving up, and this would be a down quark here, where you've got energy moving down. And I remind you of the David LaPointe research, which demonstrates that you do get energy moving both up and down. So even if I'm feeding this system only from beneath, that once the energy moves up into this area, it can blow out. It does blow out like this, and so you do get energy returning back down eventually. Is there anything else that I've got here that I was, obviously these are all my sort of really rough notes. This is me working through it, trying to understand it, and you know, for me, I've been talking about the Trinity Taurus for a few years now, or the triple Taurus, and I think that when you look at carbon, you know, in this way, you realize that it needs to be 3 Tauruses, and that the David LaPointe work is actually, when you look at the primer fields, what you're actually looking at is only a single one of these, although there's 2 cups. And you know, it's not two of these cells, it's actually a single one of these cells that's operating the whole system of the negative, positive, and in between. So actually each of those David LaPointe primer field products is actually only one of these. And so you would have a second one to get yourself up to the, you know, more complicated or more complex stuff like the boron, beryllium, those sorts of things. But by the time you get up to carbon, you require a third. And this is my this is my triple Taurus projection, if you like. Side view, again, this is a side view of it. I've said that this purple now is our ether. The blue is our breath. The green is the earth. And these are all, by the way, ether words. Breath is ether with a B. Earth is ether as well. And there's an extra letter there, but it's near enough. And this is the hearth, also an ether word. This is where it's hot. This is where it's hellish, if you like. I did link the 7 stages of consciousness into this, and I was following some research, and I realized that actually I could plot consciousness in this way up to 7, and that, you know, the lower consciousness mindset is typically down here in the 1 and 2, perhaps 3, you know, and this aligns with your energy wheels, the chakras. So and it also actually refers, in my view, I will try and flesh that out, but I think it refers also to the beasts of the world, that all beasts, all plants and so on have a degree of consciousness, but the higher consciousness is reserved only for God's children, you know, God's creation, God's mankind. So I've written a few notes here to myself. Again, can't really read them, but let me show you what I mean by this depiction here. I've got now I've got a double Taurus, and this is the first time in which you know, a double Taurus, by the way, when you're so if you only had a single, sorry, double Taurus, I mean a single sine wave. If you only had a photon or a particle with a single, then the science boys would count that as a half spin. But once it takes on both, and that's obviously the upward and downward, or the returning energy, once it takes on both, then they would count that as a full spin. So this here they would count that as 1 full spin. And they would count this as 1 full spin, and I've not really depicted this correctly, but really if you take this area here, then this would be a 1 full spin. And this is where I was getting into, hey, this could be what carbon is, because although they say it is 1 full spin, they would count this as because of the way they look at it, they would count this as 1 and 2, and 1 and 2, or 2 and 3 and 4, and 5 and 6. So this is where you can get into having 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. I haven't actually explained, and so I don't know where my research is on that, but a proton being the positive, the neutron being your neutral, and your electron obviously being the charge, the electrical charge. And I think this is probably the depiction of the electrical input, and this is the magnetic element. And magnets are kind of hot, and electric is cold and fluid. The green I've depicted, I'll see in later drawings, you'll see I refine this somewhat. And in mainstream science, they actually, if you ask the, you know, go into Wikipedia or whatever and say, you know, show me I want to say covalent bond, but I don't think that's the right word. But show me a depiction of like a carbon atom, then you will see that they kind of draw it like this with two sort of circular globs, and then one other which kind of sits either side of it, or kind of goes around like this in this area. So I believe that this is the third Taurus system here, is this one sitting around the outside of these two, and this is turning around this plane. And then what is being fed in here, so I've spoken about the energy rising, but what is being fed in across the horizon is your sun and moon energy. These are coming in through this side here and interacting with the whole system. It led me to do a drawing of a top view down into that system. And when you take this drawing here, because this is the side view, but when you cut through it from the top view, you end up with this. And this is what sparked me off into looking at the world map again and saying, wow, is it possible that our world map looks something like this, with an Africa in the center and a Europe stroke Russia up here, in North America, South America, China, or Asia, I suppose, and Australia down in this section, but where water has perhaps covered up some of this area, and then this would be possibly your Antarctic continent, subcontinent, whatever that is down there. And interestingly, you do have these turning energies when you cut through that drawing this way. You do have these turning energies, and we know that we have a cold current running up Africa and a warm current running down the east coast of Africa. So it did make me wonder whether this wasn't a more a likely candidate for the way that our Earth, in pre-flood or whatever, when it was originally designed, it looked perhaps a little bit like this: land bridges to some of these places. Some of them, of course, have perhaps been covered over, or perhaps this is our Arabian Peninsula. So I mean, I couldn't make it work when I started looking at the map and the measurements, as you've probably seen my work on that. But I really tried. And this is me fleshing it out a little bit more. Now, if I was to say this is your east, and then this is up or north, really, I mean, that's probably not helpful, but that's your northern aspect. If you're standing in the center here, then that would be your north, that would be your south. Your rising sun would come from here, and for a person standing here, the way I've depicted this at the moment, that would be a position of new moon. I'll need to also help you explain that a little bit better, and I hope to do so in good time. For God said, I am the light of the world. See the eyes? I was just trying to flesh this out a little bit more and put the oceans in. By the way, if you look up the oceans of the world, you'll be told by NOAA, which is the American oceanic people. They will tell you that there's only one ocean, but it's broken up into 4 main oceans. So I tried to kind of flesh that out a little bit with this work here. So as you can see, I was really trying quite hard to see if I couldn't make a map work, and I'm still I haven't thrown this in the bin, obviously, because I still think it's worth people thinking about. That actually, it may well be that a cut through of a tomato offers you a more accurate idea of what the Earth once looked like or might look like at the moment. If I show you this again, this was another depiction of that. It does mean, I mean, this is one of the things, is that it does mean that the oceans are not necessarily in the alignment or the names that we give to the Atlantic, because my hypothesis was that, this is Europe up here and this is America. So, and they call this the Atlantic Ocean. So I wasn't quite sure how, because there's there's what, the Arctic Ocean, Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian, as I've shown it here. But this whole business of Alaska and North America and so on, and the Pacific, it is a bit of a minefield. But I don't trust any of the maps that we have anymore. Now, what else did I have for you? I do have some more stuff. Please bear with me. These are some of my possible real-world map projections. I wanted to make sure that I had referred to the actual science, or at least the some of. I mean, I was pretty poorly disciplined when going through the research initially, which is why I'm probably going to have to go do it all, some of it again. But I looked into electron configuration, shells and subshells, quantum superposition, the Pauli exclusion, the Planck constant, and the, what does that say? Can you read that for me? Schrodinger's equation. You look at it, listen to the scientists talk about these, you go, damn, this all fits with electromagnetic theory on a flat, non-rotating or flat Earth. I was looking into graphene, which, as you'll know, will be the smallest they can. What else have I got there? I can actually read it through my screen better. Spin up anti-clockwise. Yeah. It moves negative to positive. I mean, there is so much fantastic research out there. So this is just the beginnings of it, guys. What I wanted to point out was that when I drew what I thought was a gluon, the very smallest particle, or one of the smallest things that we know about, I wondered whether that if I had to shrink our universe down to the simplest of levels, that when you look up into, if you were standing underneath it or halfway through the apple, if you like, and looking up, what you would find is this this Southern Cross, or this and it does have biblical or religious kind of overtones, doesn't it, with this cross here? But you would actually see this diamond shape, and if you had to spin this diamond shape at a very high rate, it would actually become just a circle, and it would possibly, if it was a black hole, because this was the point at which the light was eventually turning from to white light, and then punching through the roof, if you like, of the apple. This is the point at which it becomes black. And so if this is a circle spinning, and it is absorbing all light, or receiving all light, becoming black, then I think that our sun may be this. That all light is being funneled and is moving upwards through the color spectrum into white, and then to zero, into our sun. So I think our sun is a black hole. I think that what we see as the yellow orb is that point at which the light is being, if you like, just prior to being absorbed into the black hole. This is its kind of final moment, and that it means that our roof is possibly like a witch's hat, or a spire on a church, or a pyramid, if you like, going up into the top of the structure. The pyramid is obviously a very popular icon, but what I think is that our whole roof is pulled up like a little bit like those big circus tents, you know, where they've got one massive pole that runs right up through the center of that, and that's the point at which our light leaves the universe. I should, or our known universe. I should quickly add that if that is true, then it's important to note that as the light leaves here at the black hole, as it leaves here, we're not all standing. Well, relativity allows for us to all stand in the middle. You know, that's what relativity does. It always centers you, the observer, on the universe around you. But I don't subscribe to the idea that there is a single sun. I think there's a single point which is turning. I think there's 3 points of rotation. This being one of them, the three, or the heart, or the center, the third of the Tauruses. I think this upper Taurus is turning, and I think the lower Taurus may be turning. That's very controversial, of course, because it suggests that actually the plate that we stand on, something is turning. Either the plate is turning very slowly as part of the 26,000 year cycle that we live in. But that's even controversial for me to say. But the very important aspect to how we perceive the sun, or what we see as the point of light, is that it's not just the position of this and the observer, but it's also obviously to do with the position of the incoming sine wave, the energy sine wave that is the sun. So if you're the observer standing here and there's your point of your sun, it's a combination of whatever liquid or whatever, because up there it's really cold, and we know that there's super light gases which can liquefy when they're very cold. So through this sort of magnifying glass up here, an observer is receiving this wave, and it is interacting with the position, the superposition of this upper Taurus, which may be how we get different seasons. What I noticed, and I'd never, having watched a lot of Santos Bernacci's stuff a few years ago, he always talks about the sine wave and so on, but I hadn't really figured out, or I'd never seen him explain how actually, if this was your sun energy and this was your moon energy, that you can then use this as a depiction of how a day and a 28-day cycle might look. Because as an observer, let's say I was to move my crosshairs. Obviously, I can't do this manually here. But if I was to move my crosshairs and say, well, now my central position is, say, here, then this would be a point at which it would be midday. The sun was at its hottest point, or its highest point. Yeah, this would be my morning, and this would be my evening. This would be sunset. If I was to, that would be a single, well, from this point here at morning, sunset, and then morning again, yeah, midnight, and then the new day. So that would be a 24-hour span. This here would be a 24-hour period of the wave. Now, these waves are not moving in this neat, perfect formation. We know that because the moon doesn't follow the exact cycle of the sun. The sun is as regular as clockwork, isn't it? It's every 24 hours you will have the same, similar sun position. Whereas in 24 hours, if I was the moon, for example, then I would be in a slightly offset position from what I'm drawing, what I'm showing you now. Let me try and explain that a little bit better. Right, if you take this as a 28-day span, then the moon at this point in time here would be, let me say that a little bit better. I've drawn a little blue moon here, but didn't Elvis sing about, I mean, not Elvis, Donald Trump sing about a blue moon? Now, what I'm trying to get to is that you can demonstrate using these two sine waves how at a different time of the month, if you had to shift this back a little bit, you would start to get to, like, I'm really struggling with this today. I used to have it really clear in my head, because at this point here, you got the moon at its furthest point from the sun. So this, I would suggest to you, would be your full moon period. This would be your no moon period, and then this would be growing back into, oh heck, I'm gonna have to re-record this piece because this isn't very clear and concise. But I'll end it there for now, and we'll tidy this up a little later.